Okay, so usually whenever I make any videos or even when I talk about certain things, I want that to be as spontaneous as possible because I don't know, when I follow some kind of a script, I just ruin it. So this video is also something very much like that. So this is very spontaneous. There is no script associated with this. So I'll be just saying things which just comes to my mind. I hope you guys learn something out of that. So in this video, we will be talking about the digital note maintaining system. And to be frank, the system I'm basically using right now, it is a very extended version. This is something which I've been using since 4 to 5 years, maybe like 5 years approximately. And this system has evolved a lot. So it deals with different kind of problems. And in this segment, I'll be just looking into one particular kind of problem and how do I deal with it and a certain kind of a documentation. Maybe if I make some other videos, then I'll be extending this even further. And then I'll just show you how other things are also done. But this video itself probably works or mostly covers so many things. I mean, this is sort of like a very good introduction, I hope. And so the first thing I want to do is that I want to give you a theoretical understanding of what exactly we're trying to do here. And after that, we'll move into how the system itself works. And then I'll just show you how do I set up this entire system, how you can actually set up this entire system. Okay, so now the first idea is that, okay, there is some theory to understand. Okay, so what is the conventional way of documenting ideas? That is basically through notebooks, right? So let's say that you learn about something or you read about something. What you do is that you basically write it down into some kind of a paper, and maybe you read that several times and you just anticipate that, that thing will just flow into your head. And there is so many other things people actually does. So the other thing is like spatial repetition. They read the things multiple times to basically by heart. And this is actually the process of by hearting, right? So the reality is that ideas and mind, your brain, all those kind of things simply doesn't work like that. Okay, I think the most incredible thing about the human mind is that it has this ability of creativity, or it can actually think about different ideas, and it can think about some kind of a very interesting threads, and then you can actually document it somewhere, and maybe you can connect it to something else, and you can create a web of ideas out of that. That's one thing. For example, even long time back, when writing was evolving, even during the time of Rome, people had very long debates on whether we should actually write, because oral was something which is considered as way more superior than writing. The first reason for that is when you are actually telling somebody something. Let's say that if your lecturer is actually trying to tell you something, you really take that so seriously because of the authority he basically has. And second is that this guy is really telling you something, that actually gives a sense of truth into that idea. So the same thing when you actually read it. So that sort of actually you will have an idea, you will have a thing in your mind that is this what actually the writer is trying to say, or is this what it is? And this is one of the reasons that people often cross-refer. I mean, in fact, for me, when I used to study in my UG, I used to cross-refer things. So but later, I mean, I wasn't aware about why this thing was there. To understand the same thing, I probably refer the same thing in different places. So today the same thing is done in different ways. Number one is that, let's say that if you want to do certain things, what you do is that you go to internet and then open 5 links, and all the 5 links are saying the same thing, then you sort of get the idea, right? And if you're using a chat GPT, it is very conversational in nature. So you will prompt so that you can get convinced about what exactly the GPT is trying to say. Okay. So what does all this has to do with the writing? So the raw format of writing that you basically maintain, that is with your textbook, or not textbook, the notebooks in general, is merely a method of repetition, spatial repetition. And second is that you're just writing it down because you want to actually memorize it. Okay, so that's not how the brain works. That's not how ideas basically works, and that's not how the knowledge also works. Okay, so the way how you can actually conceptualize this is, see, if you understand something, if you really understand certain things, then you don't need to basically by heart it. Okay, there is no necessity of by hearting. I mean, you don't actually forget the name of your parents, and you don't actually forget so many things in your life. Why? Because that particular piece of memory is associated with so many other pieces of memory, right? So this piece of memory cannot exist just standalone. That is, if you just decide that I'm going to forget this, you cannot actually just forget it, because this is actually linked to so many things, right? The other thing is that you cannot actually forget so many important people in your life, right? Even if they die, then memory just lasting, because that person has created so many other pieces of memories in your life that these memories sort of concurrent into this particular piece of memory, and you always remember that, right? So that's the whole point. So now think about any piece of idea, anything that you're trying to understand. Anything that you're trying to understand is also some piece of an information, or that is also an idea. Okay, everything. This is what I mean. There's something called postmodern philosophy, and this is the one of the postmodern philosophies thinking that as human beings are consumers of fiction, and everything that you consume is basically text, and text are basically ideas, and these ideas are integrated to something else that we call as concepts. Apparently, concepts are also some kind of an idea, right? So, what is the point? You say that you have evolved some kind of an understanding on certain things. So you say that thing when when you build more pieces of connections or more pieces of concepts to one certain idea. Okay, so let's say that if there is an X idea, okay, and you're building more concepts associated to this thing, and then you are building more for you're making that idea more for. If you read any books associated to memory, this is what you basically just read. I wasn't familiar about all these things which I'm just saying right now at some point of time. So I was very much into this world of memory, how to memorize things and all this stuff. So I read this very interesting author called Dominic Oberhead. And Dominic Oberhead has this idea that, how does this memory masters actually memorize certain things? So he actually reveals a trick. So they have different techniques for it. So how does that technique work is that if you want to memorize certain things, you sort of we call it as an encoding. You give another representation to that, build a story to that, and make the story in such a way that every piece that you want to memorize is sort of interlinked to each other, more interlinkages in basically as you will memorize that particular piece. Okay, but this is not exactly this memorization and all this kind of stuff. This is not I want to give special attention to in this piece of lecture, but I'm just trying to lay some kind of a theory so that you can sort of get an idea what we're actually trying to do here. In fact, we're actually going to get more detail into different kind of techniques and approaches I sort of actually follow in my digital note system so that you can have a better representation of your knowledge by your own. So the particular thing that we'll be doing today is that I have been watching some movies since 2 months, okay, and I never actually paid much attention to documenting my ideas on these kind of movies and all. Even right now, these are very incomplete projects. I mean, so many things which I am involved in this thing is sort of incomplete. But what I want to actually give you is the more technical aspect of this stuff. So you don't need to pay much attention to what exactly I'm doing. I mean, the project I'm involved in. I mean, eventually this is something which will get filled up as I graduate my understanding in this entire domain. But moreover, what I want you to understand is the technology and the techniques which I sort of follow inside this, because the project is an ongoing thing, and whenever I get time or whenever my mind is free, I sort of fill these informations. And there are so many principles I basically follow inside this. So maybe this video is not adequate to explain the entire principles I basically follow inside the space. So we may have a separate video about that. But as well as now, we will just focus on the technical aspect of this. So they already provided some kind of a brief with the theory of what exactly happens with the digital notes. So the first thing you need to know is what is the kind of application that we're using here. Okay, so where you can download it. Okay, so the application that we are using is called Obsidian. Yeah, so Obsidian has their own official website, so you can come to this website, get the Windows version. If you're using Windows, then you can download the Windows version, or else if you're looking for some other applications like iOS, you can download it from here, like Mac. So this is where you download it. Okay, now the first thing is that when you download Obsidian and install it, okay, this is going to look very different from my own Obsidian, because my own Obsidian is something which went through different iterations. And okay, so this is how my Obsidian sort of look like when you open it, because I am running a theme on it, so it will look different, it will feel different. Everything in my Obsidian will be completely different from the Obsidian version that you will be downloading. Okay, so end of this video, we will be taking your Obsidian from the vanilla version to a much more advanced version. So Obsidian is sort of like a platform where you basically write your notes, and it's not just about note. Okay, it's basically a knowledge management system. I mean, I'm not a very big fan of saying that this is a digital note keeping system or anything like that. I mean, the potential of Obsidian is way beyond a conventional digital note taking system. I mean, the reason is that this is it's a knowledge management system. That is the way how you manage your knowledge. So every manager, or like whoever is actually managing their knowledge through Obsidian, different people will have different approach. So I will have an approach, and my approach will be completely different from someone else's approach. So whatever you're going to see in this video, it is going to be completely different and unique compared to all these kind of other YouTube tutorials you might be exploring regarding this topic, because for them it will be something very different. The knowledge management principles will be very different. For me, it is very different. So whatever you see in this, these are techniques and methods and productivity approaches I basically built throughout this time. I mean, I've been using Obsidian since 4 years. So before Obsidian, I was using OneNote for like another 4 years. So there is so much of learning I acquired from OneNote, and which I sort of tried to implement in Obsidian in Obsidian's way. Things are going to be completely different. Okay. Now, the first thing I want to actually show is just simply how do you actually start a node. Okay. It's not just about a node. So in Obsidian, for anything and everything, you can basically assign some kind of a shortcut to this. And for me, I have the shortcut that is Control N for starting a new node. Okay. Now, let it be untitled one. Okay. So where is this node? What is the location of this node? Okay, so this is another thing that you need to understand inside the world of Obsidian. That is, all these kind of nodes that you create, they occupy in some kind of a folder. So you need to think about a very sensible way to organize your files inside the Obsidian's folder hierarchy. So different people have different approaches. Last year I was going through Reddit, and somebody was asking this question in the Obsidian community, like, what is a folder hierarchy? So again, I told you, every manager, like whoever is managing their knowledge system through Obsidian, everyone has their own hierarchy. So for me, I have a hierarchy like this: actions, animation. This is something I use to track my sprints. I mean, yeah, that's a different stuff. And attachment, book, calendar, Copilot conversations. Okay, these are some very different stuff. You know, Copilot conversation. That, I mean, in a brief, I have integrated ChatGPT to my Obsidian environment. So I can basically use ChatGPT inside my Obsidian itself. So very much like how we go to chatgpt.com and search for some queries or prompts there, I can use that stuff inside my Obsidian environment. So how do I do that? Again, Obsidian has several plugins which enable you to do these kind of stuff. So Obsidian, what makes Obsidian powerful is the world of plugins. There are like so many plugins for very, very unique purposes. So you basically use different combinations of plugins to customize your nodes and your environment according to how you want to manage your nodes. So maybe in this video or maybe in the coming videos, I'll just try to give a brief on what are the principles I basically use to maintain my nodes. So this is basically more about a demonstration video, and then setting up your environment and demonstration, setting up, and after that, how do you sort of actually use it? I mean, how do you put different pieces together in Obsidian? That is another stuff. So this is a code file, that is this node folder. So as you can see, it has like 13,583 files. That means, I mean, this is something I have created. I don't know, I mean, it's at least like, yeah, again, 4 to 5 years old. So this 13,000 files are, again, some of them are placeholders. Yeah, those are like another principle. I mean, I don't want to get into detail of that. So 13,583 files are the files I have created as of now inside the Obsidian environment. All these are nodes. All these are nodes. Okay, so the first question is that how do you basically navigate through these 13,000 files? I mean, when you want to actually look for something, how do you basically find it? This is a very common problem in all the note-taking applications. Like let's say that if you're using OneNote or any other Notion or whatever it is, after a point of time, like let's say after you have created like 100 files, it's going to be very difficult for you actually find some piece of information inside that environment itself. So think about 13,000 files. 13,500 files. I mean, how do you navigate in between these files? So this is the reason why you need to have a much more sensible hierarchy of folders, so that you can just navigate to any nodes at any point of time. Okay, and then there are plenty of markers inside the note itself, which sort of ensures that I reach certain nodes very easily without even using any kind of search or anything. I mean, for me, I rarely use a search. There is a whole note search feature inside Obsidian. I very rarely use it. I mean, I don't even need to use it because I know where certain things are written and how to navigate to that. So I will just show you all those stuffs inside this brief tutorial. Okay, yeah, this is how you basically create a node, right? So what are the sources for these information which comes into a node? So the first thing is that the kind of stuff that you write inside your node, right? You basically write certain things, your ideas and all this kind of stuff inside your Obsidian environment, inside your node. That is the first source. And the second source is that bookmarks, okay? So you read so much of things in a browser, right? You search for certain things and you want to highlight certain information. Let's say that when I'm watching certain movies, I want more interpretations of that movie, and I look into internet, what are the other interpretations, and I find so much relevant information, and that information need to be brought into the Obsidian environment. That is some another stuff, okay? So that means I need to basically integrate the bookmark manager of my browser, okay, and my Obsidian environment. That is another stuff. Now, the other thing is that, let's say that if you're reading some kind of a research paper or some kind of a book or something like that, then you need to bring that information to your Obsidian. Okay, now we have like three sources. The source number one is the notes that you basically write inside Obsidian. Second is that the notes that you basically find in internet. And third is that the notes that you fetch from some kind of a reference manager. Okay, in our case, we are using Zotero. So Zotero is basically an application where you can store and manage all these kind of reference, all these kind of research papers, books, and whatever. I mean, any kind of documents can be actually put into Zotero. And Zotero again maintains some kind of a folder hierarchy for these kind of stuff. And whatever you read, this can be integrated to the Obsidian environment, and this can be brought in. Okay, so Obsidian eventually will become one place for storing all the kind of things that you learn from everywhere. Nowadays I even have something else as well. That has, let's say that if I'm watching some kind of a lecture in YouTube, I get the transcript of that, and then I convert that into a PDF. Then I store that in my Zotero. And from the Zotero, I make the highlights, I read more about it, and then I import that into my Obsidian. So this is a similar such kind of stuff. I mean, this is the transcript of a postmodernism lecture, and this is a link for that. In fact, why do we use actually Zotero? Zotero is something which enable you to not just store documents or any books or anything like that, but it is a reference manager. That means, let's say that if you're fetching some information from internet, especially let's say some kind of a PDF or something like that, this works particularly for research papers, because research papers has so much of information, meta data associated to this. That is, who wrote the paper, when was it written, DOI number, and and the abstract of it, the conclusion. So much of metadata is associated to any research paper. So when you basically write another research paper, you basically provide annotations. Like when you write certain things, you basically say that, okay, this part of the information is something I got from this particular research paper. So that annotation mapping is what Zotero basically enables. So I just recently started using Zotero. I mean, a couple of years back, one of my friends, he asked me, like, whether we were in a community, we were talking about Obsidian in the Clubhouse community. And he brought up about this Zotero integration in Obsidian, and at that point of time I was not using it. And then recently, when I was looking more into certain research papers, I sort of figured it out that maybe if I have the Zotero Obsidian integration, then that will work so well. So Zotero is right now my go-to for all the kind of references and all the kind of management regarding the references. So this is a transcript, and I have some highlights here. And all these highlights and all these kind of stuff, I can actually bring it to my Obsidian, and from that I can build more notes or more abstract views on this particular idea. Okay. Yeah. So coming back to Obsidian, a while back I mentioned that ideas are very much related and they are like interconnected and all this kind of stuff. So I want to talk about something called the reductionism. Okay, and the reductionism is basically, let's say that if you have a very larger idea, if you have something something pretty abstract, and how do you actually break it down? So reductionism is basically an approach for that. So the reason I'm actually explaining all those kind of things is the note-taking approach, the way how I manage my notes, that pretty much mimics how I think about certain things, my own thinking models towards the world. So let's say if I get something, let's say if I want to study about rockets, how do I basically approach that? I'll be like breaking down the entire rocket into different components, individually studying different parts, and then patching them together and get a holistic picture. Okay, so reductionism is basically breaking down of any complex idea into tiny components, and then learning that. And then you somehow just rebuild that. That's how you sort of build your understanding about things which are complex. So I have written a blog on reductionism. This is a very common approach followed in programming, and especially in programming. I mean, how do you basically write objects? Objects itself is basically some kind of an abstraction, and you basically have classes, subclasses, or classes which basically mimics the nature of the objects, and objects itself has another sub objects or something like that. Think about something like a car. A car is basically an object as a whole, but you can actually break down the car into several other objects as well, like whether it is a diesel car or whether it is some kind of a electric car, hybrid or something like that, and then you can again further drill down into that individual components and study more about it. Largely, this is again categorization, right? All these reductionism is basically categorization, subcategorization, and all this kind of stuff. So reductionism is one way you can actually think about complex ideas, but it is not necessary that everything basically follows these kind of a hierarchy, the kind of a hierarchy that you see on screen. So certain things can be way more convoluted than you can even think of. For example, let's go to something called graph view. Okay, so look at it. Look at how much complicated this is, how much web this is. So something is related to something, and that something is related to something else. And look at something like this. Oh, this is functions. Yeah. Okay. Maybe very bad example to get started with. Production functions. Yeah, okay, think about this particular relationship itself. Okay, so these are some lectures I followed like a couple of years back. So how one note is related to something else, and look at the nature of the relationship. That is, this is actually related to this. I mean, look at the direction of the arrows. Okay, I mean, you can actually use the direction of the arrows to understand like how something is related to another one, and this particular thing is sort of how related to David Ricardo. And okay, I may have to zoom out a little bit. And that stuff is also related to Adam Smith. Yeah, okay, and so this is some notes on risk. Okay, I think these are some of these are questions. And look at something like state. Seeing like state is a book, and that is related to my note on state. Hamaguchi is a director. Yeah. Poverty measurement. So poverty measurement, oh, this is interesting. So poverty measurement is a note which is related to how you measure poverty. Okay. And that is something linked to a movie called Shoplifters. So because while I was watching Shoplifters, it just occurred to me that, Shoplifters is a story about a very poor Japanese family, and the kind of stuff happens inside the family. It's a thriller, it's a very interesting movie. So it just occurred to me that poverty, we sort of measure poverty, but rather than measuring poverty, I mean, poverty as an experience is a whole different idea, right? So while I was watching this movie, it occurred to me that I need to show some kind of a relationship in between poverty as a measurement and poverty as an experience. So I may have written about that inside Shoplifters. So poverty as a state. Yeah, okay, that's what I have written here. And look at some other connections used inside this note, that is capitalistic rationality. So this is a blog which I was working on. I started this 21 December 2023, and I was outlining the things which should go into this particular blog, and then it occurred to me that this is going to be something really big because this is a very big topic, and I will have to explain about so many things to draw a picture about what I mean by capitalistic rationality. Maybe this will turn into some kind of a book or something like that. So these are some kind of a reference I basically used. So this is basically this is a postmodern thinker called Michael Foucault. So Michael Foucault has some works on something you call as penal code, the IPC, So how IPC is pretty much related to the capitalistic order and all this kind of stuff. So his work on penal code is something I consider as an interesting reference for writing about this blog. And commoditization, culture as knowledge, all this kind of stuff are certain abstract ideas I just wrote. Yeah. So if you basically spend some time inside, this is basically a global map view, and you can sort of understand how different things are interlinked to each other. Maybe if you spend some time, maybe so many interesting things will come out. So market elasticity is something somehow related to information asymmetry. The Lemons problem, to be specific. And then the word of Badgett, I know that is basically a note on financial economics, the working of financial markets and all this stuff. So this is something I'm working on right now, and that is also related to the market elasticity. If you're a student of economics, you know what this stuff is. So I don't actually use this graph view very often because, as you can see, that graph view doesn't add too much of value to my workflow. I can just look at this stuff and maybe see certain connections, but I don't need it. Okay, so this looks pretty nice. There are people who makes very complicated graph view. They really tailor their notes to make their graph view really good. I have a friend who does something like that, and he was using Obsidian at the very beginning stages of the development of the Obsidian itself, and the developers of the Obsidian, they got really interested with the kind of graph views he was creating, and they one time he posted those things in his Twitter, and they asked him for permission to repost it, and that was a viral at some point of time. So very interesting friend is. So this is what the graph view sort of looks like, and this is very different from the reductionism I just mentioned a while back, because this is purely lateral thinking. This is like different systems. Each of these nodes are basically descriptions of nodes about different systems and how one system is pretty much connected to the other system, or like how certain viewpoints of certain thinkers are related to something else. So that's what this is trying to map, and this map includes everything. It actually includes philosophy, political science, mathematics, financial economics, so many things. So pretty interesting stuff. So sometimes what I do is that I also use mind maps as sort of like a combination with this kind of a graph view as well. That is, let's say that this is a mind map. Okay, so what I can do is I can go to this mind map, and yeah, so this is basically a course I took from Coursera, I guess, 7 years back. So this is probably a very early version of this mind map. Yes, it is. So this mind map sort of draws the overall idea of that particular course itself. Okay, and this has like 2 versions. So whenever I create certain nodes, I create multiple versions. So there is something called the version 0, that will be the very basic version of that particular node. And then as the node expands, or as I get more ideas with that node, I just create a new version of that. Okay, for example, yeps. So maybe not this. Let's go to Kai. Yeah, so this is much better. So this is basically a blog I wrote recently. It's just there in my website. So this is the blog. So this blog went through different iterations. Okay, I mean everything is like, so you have a certain view of actually looking at certain ideas, right? I mean, there is a very proper structure to this particular blog. It's not something, it just came out of vacuum. Like, so much of thinking went into the narration style of this blog itself. So that was actually developed inside this environment. Okay, so this is pretty much the version 0. You can see that these are bullet points, and then slowly it makes transition to a final version of the blog. So again, here also, it is evolving. So those bullet points are gone, and right now these are paragraphs. And I think this is the final version. Yeah. So I wanted to add some additional information as well. So this is sort of like the final version of that blog. Okay. So this is why versions are important, because if you're thinking about certain things evolves throughout the time. So you need multiple versions to basically keep track of it. Okay. So this comes pretty much handy when it comes to writing, because you want to see that transition. Okay. Yes. So this one also had some earlier version to this. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's version, yeah. So version 0. Yeah. So you can already see that. I mean, there is so much of additional information in the version 1 compared to the version 0. Yeah. So this is the whole idea with the naming. Okay. These are some other principles I sort of follow inside my note. So coming back to this mind map. So this mind map again has a version 2. So this is a much more elaborated version of the previous mind map, which is so, and I have more links associated to this mind map. I have people like Mars and all this linked to this. Okay, so these are the links. Okay, what you basically see, these are basically the links. Okay, iron law of wages. Again, this is something created by David Ricardo. Yeah. So here is. I mean. Yeah, so here is a view of the links that you have created to every individual file. So these are the links. I mean, where all this particular knot is connected. Okay, all these are basically the connections. So it basically highlights and shows you that where this particular knot is sort of connected. So this is a much more expanded and a more elaborate view of the mind map or something like that. It forms more than. So this is Martian superstructure. So superstructure that is also related to this. Okay. And it also gives you some additional information, that is what are some other potential hooks you can actually create. So that is the unlinked mentions. That is, in all these nodes there are mentions of Mars, but I haven't created all those links. I didn't do it because I'm actually not a very big fan of these kind of links. I mean, yeah, I mean, links are pretty handy, but still the way how I use Obsidian is very different compared to these links. So that I will demonstrate in a while. Okay, now let's get into something more important, that is thinking about the structure of a node itself. How do you actually think about a node? And then I will get into the data view, and then the database view. So how do you actually create more complex structures with these kind of nodes? Okay, so let's think about a very simple node. How do you create a node? Okay, so this is how you create a note, right? And once you create the note, you can actually organize this note into a sensible hierarchy that is inside a folder. Okay, and then what you need to do is that this is something you call as a template. Okay, so every note, all these are things I basically built throughout the time. Okay, so this is something you call as a YAML file or a YAML metadata. So this is basically a metadata. So the metadata is basically the information about the note itself. That means whatever I'm going to write in this particular note, that note itself has some kind of a reference or some kind of a context to this. Okay, so metadata actually provides that kind of a reference to this. For example, let's say that the particular note I'm writing, is it something I copied from some kind of a book or not? Okay, that's what this is going to answer. Okay, false or true or something like that. Let's say that if it is a book, then I will put this as true. Okay, and if it is a book, then I will put the page number as well. So now I don't need these two data points. Still, I'm actually using it. I don't need it because I'm using Zotero as an integration. And if this is a video, yes, I will put that as a true. And let's say that if I have some kind of a transcript file of that video, then I will create a transcript file and attach that with this particular tag. Is there any other references? Okay, what are the tags? Is there any other notes related to this? Is there any mention to this? Mention in the sense that if this particular note is talking about some thinkers, philosophers, or anybody like that, then I'll be adding their name here. Okay, so in my Obsidian environment, I have a folder called thinkers. Yeah, so okay, all these are basically thinkers. Okay. So this is why I basically mentioned I don't use graph views very often, because look at it. I can actually use this metadata to fetch so much of interesting information about certain nodes. Okay, and I can already see things from a table rather than searching that in a global graph view. Okay, or else. Yeah, okay, this will not work here. I'll just show you that later. So this stuff, so let's say that Adam Smith has reference in 2021 CUET paper. Okay, it has reference in 22 paper and 22 paper, question number 73. And there is a note called Marcian failure. It has a reference to this. And there are a couple of transcripts which basically refers Adam Smith. So all these are basically something like that. Okay. So Marx has a reference in postmodernism, structuralism, social inclusion lecture 6. So this is the thing. I mean, whenever I attend any lecture in college, I don't actually write notes. I mean, I do write notes, but instead, I mean, what I prefer doing is I already has adequate information inside my environment itself regarding whatever is actually taught. I mean, not in all the cases, but in some of the cases or in certain subjects which I'm sort of like familiar with. So I will just make linkages. So let's say that when the professor is talking about Marxian labor theory or something like that, I'll just link that Marxian labor theory. Okay, today's lecture is related to the Marxian labor theory. So this is the social inclusion lecture 5. So he was talking about Marx labor theory. So those are two linkages I made there. So okay, now I know that what was taught on that day and how that was related to something which I studied like several years back. So this is also related to the mind map, and that's the whole idea. Okay, you got the idea, right? So these are the backlinks. So I basically maintained a huge hierarchy of such thinkers and navigate. Yeah, all these are basically, I think, are like 41 thinkers. So all these are basically some thinkers, philosophers, political scientists, certain people I have actually studied, read throughout the time. So all these people has a place in my folder. So whenever I read something regarding them, I just map them here. Okay, it is basically a marker. It is, maybe I may not have most of this file filled. I mean, so much of this stuff is actually empty. Okay, yeah, Max Weber is empty. So much of this stuff is empty, but look at it. Max Weber has so many references. I can just easily bring these things here and build a note on Max Weber. Okay, the reason I'm not doing is because that information is already created in some other node. So I only need Max Weber as just a reference point. So that's the whole point. So this is like every time when you create certain nodes, like when you create these linkages, right? You're actually expanding your views. For example, the Max Weber page is actually empty, yet the Max Weber's references in different contexts, that itself provides what the Max Weber is all about. Okay, if I want to add information regarding Max Weber here, I can just use the GPT integration inside the Obsidian, or I can just copy paste that from the wiki. But I don't want to do that, okay? Because whatever I write here, that has to be very original ideas, certain things which came out of my own thought. So that's the whole point. Yeah. So we were talking about the YAML files, right? Yeah. So so the metadata is basically acts like a context to the node that you had basically created. Okay. And one example I can give you is okay, did you notice how I navigated to this file? I mean, I was actually looking for this file, and I don't know the spelling of this. So I know that there is a file called cinema inside this. So and that is pretty much stored inside a folder called cinema. So I basically used cinema as a context to come here. So it's a sensible way of organizing hierarchy. So that's how I navigated to. Okay, so this is a movie I saw a couple of weeks back. So 20 January, right? So look at the metadata. So for every node which I basically create, every node has its own metadata. Let's say that when I'm writing about cinema, okay, I don't need to use the metadata such as this, okay. This is not something I need for cinema. Okay, for cinema, when I write about cinema, I need to know the title of that cinema. Okay, I need to know the title, the genre, the director, screenplay, music, cinematographer, editing, the country of origin, all this kind of stuff. I mean, this is empty right now because maybe I didn't find that motivation to fill it, or maybe there was no necessity to actually fill it yet. This data points has to be there. That's the larger point. So the topics in this movie is caste and class, mostly caste, basically Brahminical hierarchy. Okay, so these are certain outlines I made on this movie. Okay, the theme superstition, social hypocrisy, political consciousness reflects openness to new ideas and progressive social and political change. The progress and modernity is perspective. So some screenshots, and this is something very interesting. I will come to this. So this is the whole point. Okay, and what does it do? What does it do is that when you have like 100 files inside a folder, and each of these files is associated to some kind of a metadata, what you can do is that you can treat your entire folder like a database, like a whole table. Okay, and you can just use that table to derive context from the whole folder itself. Okay, so let's say okay, let's get into such kind of a folder. Okay, so this is a course. I think I took this course somewhere in 2022. Okay, all these are lecture notes, and whatever you see inside this table are some of the key highlights of this lecture. Okay, so these are the tags associated to this. Okay, these are certain comments, certain reference books mentioned. I told you, right? The mention is basically it's just again another metadata. I'm actually just trying to say that this particular lecture has mentioned these two people in it. So all this information is actually trying to provide me some kind of a context on what this note is all about, what this entire folder is all about. Okay, and this is sort of like a very primitive approach, I want to say, because now Obsidian has a much better approach to observe an entire folder. Okay, that is something called as a database. So this is one way of indexing the information inside your notes, inside your folder, which is inside your folder. And without having much look into the node, I can have a context what this is all about. For example, appropriation of log 2D. So this is something talking about the social contract edition. Okay, now this is the clue, social contract edition. So where can I find rest of the information? I can actually look into my mind map, because the mind map basically has a branch on it. So that's one thing. And so these are two reference books which I mentioned in that lecture. So I can basically read more about this topic from here. These are some other mentions, like Robert Nozick, Thomas Hobbes, Immanuel Kant, and here it is about Rawls. Okay, So look at it. I mean, these are nodes which are created in 2022, right? So 2022 nodes, look at these properties. Look at all these metadata I have created here. I mean, if you look at my today's node, that has more metadata, right? This is what happens when you evolve. 2020 to 2025 is like 3 years. In 3 years, I sort of figured it out that I need more handlers in my metadata to give much better representation to my nodes. So that's why I have more data points in my 2025 nodes. Okay. And one more thing is that there are more integrations happened throughout this time. So there are approaches to handle that aspects. Okay. The next thing I want to actually show is that, so now I think you got an idea regarding what exactly is the point of metadata, what is the use of the metadata, and okay, so how do you basically get this metadata? I mean, this is something called a query. Okay, so I'll get into this querying and all in a while, maybe by the part 2 or something like that. So what querying does is that querying is very much like how do you write query in SQL. You write certain query and you fetch data from the database, right? So very much like that, you can write different combinations of query, and then you can mine very unique and very different kind of conclusions from your nodes, which is inside a folder. Okay. So I have a naming approach for this kind of index files. That is, I name them as index. So mind maps, I basically start with mind map tag, and all the index files will be starting with index. So all these are basically index files. And so this is a new approach. This is something called as database plugin. So what database plugin does is that very much like indexing. Okay, inside the indexing, the disadvantage is that you cannot actually edit the indexing. Okay, you can only view the indexing. You cannot actually edit it. If you want to edit it, then you have to go to the specific file, and then there you have to edit it. So this actually, the database plugin basically gives you much better representation compared to the regular querying or the regular indexing provided by the YAML file or the Dataview. So this is a course I took recently from Coursera, and all these are basically lecture videos. Okay, and this is basically my status on each of those videos. So this is like done, open, done. These are certain work in progress, I guess. Okay, and if I hover over that, or over this, yeah, that is empty. Yeah, so FAQs. Yeah, I can directly access the FAQs inside that node from here. Okay. So something interesting about this YAML is that you can offer embed a certain part of your node inside the YAML. For example, the FAQ, right? This FAQ is something which I embedded inside a YAML template. Okay, so when I create these kind of indexes, I can just access that particular fragment of the node directly from here. So this is pretty handy. So FAQ is something which is very important for me. So I basically add FAQ as a data point there. So these are basically the topics which are covered inside each of this lecture. So let's say that if I go to this one, okay, so look at these headings. Walker rule. So oh yeah, Walker rule. Yeah. So without even looking into the node, I get a context of what exactly is inside that node. So this is something very important, because if I want to do some kind of a revision or anything like that, since the nodes are very structurally organized inside this format, without even having any look into that node, I can basically have a context of what is inside the node from here. Okay, so this is a quick brief of how how databases works, how indexing basically works, how the YAMLs sort of work. I think all this is like too much of information for you guys, because this is something very new for most of you guys. I mean, I have been working inside this environment for a very long time, so I also went through some bit of a learning curve. So it's just a part of me right now. Okay, so let's say that data cinema. Let's open cinema. Yeah. So okay, this is the file that we just visited a while back. So this is the file. Okay, so I can get all the information. I mean, let's say that if I want to specify certain key information inside the node, and I want to see that information, I can actually use this metadata as a marker to do that. Okay, So the director, John Abraham, country version, Tamil, it's a Tamil movie. The status is done. That is, I'm done with it. The topic is movie. Movie topic is cast, and it's a movie. The reason it is a movie because I have this tag as movie because sometimes I watch documentaries as well. So maybe that was the logic I put that as movies. Okay, and Michael Haneke's Cache. It's about mass media formalism. So yeah, so much of this is open because I'm yet to free information in it. Yeah, so 97. Okay, so something else is that let's say that ideas. Okay, so idea tags. Yeah, so now I can access. The reason the idea was not there because when I was writing that note, I probably didn't create that marker there. So now I just sort of added it. So while I was watching that movie, so many ideas occurred to me. So these are certain ideas. So this is basically something regarding some animation they used inside the movie. So that's the reason why I have the timestamp and everything covered here. So I really like that kind of an animation and the camera shake effect. So this is basically a note on animation philosophy. I mean, it's just something I just made up that as like, I have some interest in animations as well. So I was just thinking about how do I structure my understanding about animation. So like that's this whole stuff is about concept design, some kind of a design philosophy I should have regarding that. What kind of template, what kind of coloring and all this kind of stuff should go into this. And looking for some inspirations and organizing ideas. See, looking for inspiration. That's the key here. Okay. And this is basically an inspiration. Sure. So that's the whole point. That's the whole point of these kind of systems. So not some pervy stuff, guys. This is basically a very important part of that documentary, by the way. So it's basically talking about some kind of religious hypocrisy, and I thought I should have that screenshot. So that's actually mentioned here. State and the religious order, the evolution of idea censorship. In religious belief, the absolute is forbidden by the order of religion. In religious, yeah, order of religion. Yeah. So that is given in brief here. So okay, so this is how sort of the navigation and all this kind of stuff work. And what else? Yeah. So the next thing I want to show is, let's say when I'm reading certain things in internet, how do I basically bring that to my Obsidian environment? Because now you sort of got a foundational idea regarding how the information is managed inside the Obsidian environment through nodes, through metadata, through database views, through indexing, and through mind map, through graph view, and all this. And let's see how these inputs are sort of handled, like how do you read certain things in Zotero and how do you import that into Obsidian, and how do you read certain things in internet and how do you bring that into Obsidian.